Hi, I'm Christina Selby. I'm a conservation photographer based in Santa Fe, New Mexico. My presentation today is focused on how conservation photography can help us understand and protect land and water. I'll share an example of a story and a conservation effort that I've been working on for several years about freshwater springs in the desert Southwest. These small ecosystems are numerous and important in the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument. So a bit about me. I am a full-time professional conservation photographer and writer. I've been doing that for about 12 years. And what that means is I work mostly on stories about rare or endangered species and ecosystems. And I partner with scientists and nonprofits, government organizations, anyone who needs me to create media to support their conservation campaigns. And then I work to publish those and raise awareness among the public, whether that's a magazine article or a public speaking or gallery show or exhibits, um, in order to raise awareness about those conservation issues. So just to start with a bit of reflection on photography in our modern age, over the last decade, we've seen an incredible rise in visitation to the world's natural areas. Two factors that have contributed to this increase are one, the growing number of nature photos shared online that introduce people to areas they otherwise probably wouldn't have known about, and two, the significant rise of nature photography as a hobby. And the issue is that visitors generally, photographers specifically, are causing negative impacts on nature, things like trampling wildlands, ignoring regulations, and damaging sensitive areas. Also, with the increase in photography has come a sense of competition among photographers. Each one is trying to get a unique photo to share on social media. Every time a new location is posted, it becomes a new hotspot, and photographers are going to greater lengths to get photos, and the boundaries of what is acceptable continue to be stretched. Even as we see, ropes, signs, and laws don't seem to stop a photographer trying to get their photo. So there needs to be more thought on the impact that we're having and reflection on how we obtain and share and promote our images. We need to be more concerned about the well-being of the natural world than we are about getting a photograph. It's important to me to remember that I'm a guest in wild places, which are home to unique natural features, as well as diverse and delicate ecosystems. So if taking a particular photograph could damage the environment, then maybe it's not worth it. The camera can be a tool to connect with nature, and we can be good stewards of the places and subjects we love while we photograph. All these factors combine to make the use of photography as a tool of conservation and not exploitation more important than ever. So what is conservation photography? This is a genre within nature photography that has grown a lot in the last decade and kind of become its own type of photography unto itself. There's a group called the International League of Conservation Photographers, of which I'm a fellow, and you can go to the website and read about the work of more than 120 fellows across the world who are helping to save particular species, habitats, and places through their photography. I see conservation photography as having two sides to the same coin. It is a way to use the camera as a tool to connect with and be good stewards of nature, and it's a way to use our images and the power of storytelling to further conservation goals and invite positive change. I want to share with you a conservation photography project on desert springs that I've been working on for about 8 years on and off. It has really forced me to slow down and learn a different way to approach nature photography. There's a lot of power in sharing the beauty, drama, and majesty of nature that an amazing landscape photograph can transmit to viewers. But desert springs are not often places that lend themselves to these grand landscapes. So in addition to seeking out those fabulous images that we all love, I began to see a way to use my camera to create deeper connections with nature and be more intentional. This approach favors the observant, nurturing, and subtle perspective over what has been traditionally valued in nature photography, the daring, the ostentatious, and the conquering perspectives. Over the years, spring ecosystems have drawn me into their subtle beauty and made me appreciate the quieter, peaceful moments. I've learned to sit and spend time in a place, to go back again and again, to find the beauty in the small scenes and the details, in subjects that are not typically seen as charismatic, and to dig deeper and research a place to uncover for myself what is there and understand how nature works, and to reflect on my own experience while there and listen over time to the story of that place that it wants to tell me. My interest in springs started in 2018. I was working in the rural town of Santa Rosa, New Mexico, on a project about the rare Pecos sunflower. This flower grows in specialized spring-fed alkaline wetlands in eastern New Mexico and a few spots left in western Texas. I spent about 18 months visiting there to photograph and tell the story of the ongoing work to preserve this federally listed flower. And while I was working on this project, I became very interested in all the other life that these spring ecosystems in Santa Rosa support. So since then, my project has expanded to capture the story of springs in drylands across the Southwest. I've visited now and photographed more than 50 springs in 6 states in the Southwest, including several in Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument, and I still have many more that I would like to visit. I'm going to share with you a small selection of images that I created at these springs. I call this story Where Water Meets the Light. In order to understand springs and the need for protection and conservation in the Southwest, I'm following the journey of spring water from its sky origins to where they emerge on land and nourish a rich biodiversity of life. So spring water begins its journey in the heights of the mountains, where it originates as pure rain and snow and slowly infiltrates into the earth. This place of origin is closest to the sky, the heavens, the astral. Many traditions across the globe understand this as our human spiritual place of origin as well. The snow or rain soaks into the ground between rocks in cracks and infiltrating into deep soils and other porous surfaces. As groundwater, the water enters what hydrologists call the black box. It often takes a roller coaster ride as it flows deeper into the earth, sometimes slowly, sometimes rapidly, with unexpected twists, turns, and drops. How far the water travels and what direction it takes depends on the solubility of the rock layers. We cannot see the journey that the water takes in the dark underground, though we know that the water takes on minerals that can change its chemical signature, and this allows us to track its journey and its story through chemistry. Eventually, the flow of the water is stopped by impermeable rock, and it finds a way to push to the surface. The water emerges into the light at springs, where in the arid Southwest, it spreads across otherwise harsh and often desolate lands to create life. Each expression of this water is different in the way it interacts with the land. Spring ecosystems are as unique as individual people. It may emerge in thousands of gallons per minute and form a sinkhole lake, with creeks running from the outflow of the lake, like this big spring pictured here in the Ash Meadows National Wildlife Refuge of Nevada. Or the water may emerge from its underground journey as a seep, bubbling slowly up from the earth and forming little pools of permanent year-round water, like this spring called Mud Spring in the otherwise dry Sandia Mountains outside Albuquerque, New Mexico. Wherever they emerge, springs are moments of cool, lush green amidst a sea of sagebrush or cactus, literally oasis in the region's thirsty landscapes. These springs are windows into the earth that give us a view and insight into the health of that groundwater supply. When visiting springs like Lower Calf Creek Falls, here pictured in Utah, I wonder how springs might also be a reflection of the windows into our souls. Where do we need to shine light into the health of our subconscious and see what we need to transform in ourselves to have a healthy relationship with nature? Due to the unique minerals that spring water picks up on its journey and releases as it spills onto the surface of the earth, each spring is unique, each harboring a different constellation of life adapted to that spring's particular water chemistry. Because of this, springs often harbor rare and endemic species, some found only at a single or a few springs and nowhere else on the earth. According to the work of the Spring Stewardship Institute, at least 10% of the country's endangered species depend on freshwater springs for all or part of their life cycle. Pictured here is a tiny spring snail, sometimes microscopic species that live in springs ecosystems. They are uniquely adapted to their habitat and serve an important role in the ecosystem by recycling nutrients in the water. Their presence indicates that a spring's water has a high quality and its structure is ideal to support life. Over 98 species have been found in Utah and Nevada alone, and 198 species across the general Southwest, with more species yet to be described. Springs in the Southwest often are isolated by arid lands, and they function as islands of habitat and paleorefugia. meaning the last holdout of ancient species once more widespread. Desert fish are often seen as the poster child for these endemic species in springs. These finger-sized, sometimes playful fish, like pupfish or the round-nosed minnow from New Mexico pictured here, were once widespread and as the climate dried, became isolated in these aquatic habitats. Desert fish are fascinating creatures adapted to survive in harsh, arid environments. This round-nosed minnow is new to science that scientists are working on to describe and name, but they live their entire life in a single spring which forms a sinkhole lake and a small stream less than a mile long. Springs are essential stopovers for migratory birds like this yellow-rumped warbler, using a small pool formed where a spring emerges in the arid La Salle Mountains surrounding Moab, Utah. And they're important watering holes for terrestrial mammals. Hanging gardens are a type of spring-fed ecosystem found in Utah and the Four Corners area. About 25 endemic plant species are associated with hanging gardens. In shady alcoves at the foot of towering sandstone bluffs, a sort of secret room reveals itself, with luxuriant green plants that cling to vertical walls in the shade, fed by a slow trickle of water. Across the Southwest, indigenous people have used springs as refueling points during long migrations, gathered resources, quenched their thirst, hunted animals. And according to Dene ethnobotanist Arnold Clifford, who I accompanied on a visit to Hanging Gardens in Bears Ears National Monument, they're also home to the deities that inhabit the massive buttes. So each plant in the Hanging Garden has a Navajo name and a medicinal and ceremonial use. To wrap up then, more than 60,000 springs pock the American West from California's Death Valley to the plains of West Texas. Though rivers and lakes contain more water in total, springs provide benefits far beyond their modest size. Despite their importance, they're poorly documented and face dire threats. Arid land springs are threatened by development, overgrazing, groundwater pumping, and other human activity. The good news is that springs, when given attention and cared for properly, are one of the most resilient ecosystems. Freshwater springs have long nurtured humans, and it is past time that humans should nurture them, and also work to protect and restore these unique places so essential to life in the desert Southwest. Many conservationists, scientists, and tribal groups are indeed working to preserve and restore freshwater springs on our public lands. And I believe that going through the process of learning to love and care for this water that emerges from the dark earth and creates life in the light is to learn once again to care for the waters within each of us and for the great water that is nature. What is the story of your spring? So that's a little taste of the photography I've captured at springs and things I've learned along the way. If you are inspired, I wanted to share that these organizations have spring surveying and restoration programs that you can support. So as I said at the beginning, using my images to have a positive impact on nature is an important aspect of conservation photography. I always ask myself, whose hands can I get my images into to raise awareness or make a difference? Who cares about this issue? I want to make my pictures count. So here's a few ways that I've shared this story over the years that I've been working on it. I built a story map through the ArcGIS platform that was shared widely online. I built a web page on my website where I publish blog articles and continue to give updates on the different springs that I visit. I publish stories and continue to publish with local, regional, and national magazines. And I've started to put together exhibits and presentations like this one to raise awareness across the Southwest. Learning the story of each spring has taught me to slow down and bring my full attention to these places as I visit. I learned from the many people that were kind enough to accompany me to springs to give something back to each. Sometimes I was able to offer some ground blue corn and sage and flower petals that I had grown in my home garden, and then I would ask permission to enter. I really understood that I needed to bring my deep attention and develop a relationship by spending at least a couple hours or repeating trips to the same place. I would meander before I started to photograph. I would sit and journal and write down what I saw and what I felt in that place. Ask myself questions like, who lives here? How do the elements and So that's what I have to share for today about conservation photography and this practice, both behind the camera as we're out in the field, and how we can share our images to have a positive impact on nature and um, bring attention to these conservation issues that are so essential. And thank you so much for listening today. Thank you to the organizers of this symposium for allowing me to share this story and this photography practice. And I will be on Zoom to answer any questions, or you can contact me on my website or my email and Instagram. Thank you so much.